Welcome, everyone. This panel, as we just heard from Tara, will address climate change and following the science for a more secure nation. And my name is Odine Serrano, and I'm happy to join you today as the moderator of this panel. I've had the good fortune to work and study for over 2 decades in the field of environmental science and policy during the first half of my career at NASA and then the latter at NGA, but dedicating my time to the nexus to intelligence. And I envisioned when I was at NGA that we needed to kind of develop a framework, a geospatial framework for advocating holistic, multidisciplinary engagement across multiple sectors. I defined 2 goals. I think my slide is up behind me. Let me just, there we go. We had 2 goals here that we had in mind to look at the problem systemically, to link climate, food, water, and ecosystems in the nexus to security, so that we could unify scientists and practitioners and intelligence analysts to define a common strategy for bidirectional feedback between environmental scientists, policymakers, and the intel community. Today, we are exploring climate and security as a component of the environmental security system, and understanding these climatological sciences is crucial to our understanding and holistically addressing the increasing weather severities and frequencies, coupled with the understanding of respective pressures and costs that impact our society and pose security threats. So today, I'm proud to introduce our esteemed colleagues, a panel of colleagues that will be discussing key drivers, strategies, and data-driven modeling methods. But before we get going into to our discussion here, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to please briefly describe who you are, your role in institution, and your initial thoughts related to climate and climate change as a component of national security. And I'll begin with Dr. Chris Tucker.
Great. Well, thanks so much for moderating our panel today. Thanks to USGIF for throwing this wonderful event today, and for the invitation to speak. My name's Chris Tucker. For the purposes of this conversation, I guess I'm the chairman of the American Geographical Society and author of a book entitled A Planet of 3 Billion. I guess where I come at this from is, oftentimes when we talk about climate change, we talk about these kind of disembodied kind of scientific concepts of atmospheric heat and, the heat and carbon that's trapped in our atmosphere and oceans, the amount of heat trapped in the system that's going to lead to, sea level rise and thus the impacts. And I always like to back it up a step and point out that, this is just like many other phenomena on our planet. It's a product of the complex interaction of our human geography, our physical geography, and our biogeography. And it's actually driven by human action. But people often forget that humanity hasn't been a static thing over the past 100 years. We've added, billions of people over the course of the 20th century. We're currently at roughly 7.8 billion. And we began at let's say the middle of the 20th century at less than half of that. So we're adding roughly 80 million people to the planet every year. That's the equivalent of 10 New York cities. And thus, every year, the human impact on the planet is actually quite different. It's materially different. And thus, the impact each year is different on our biogeography and in turn on our physical geography, and then that loop begins again. So I just like to encourage us to not think of this as, I can't imagine why things got worse this year, when the magnitude of the human footprint on our planet, which is much bigger than our carbon footprint on the planet, it continues rather unabated. So I'll kind of stop there, and sure we'll take a lot of questions.
Thanks so much. And Vasit, over to you, Vasit.
Sure. Thank you, Odin. My name is Vasit Sagan, Associate Professor, Geospatial Scientist by training. I am the director of the St. Louis University Geospatial Institute, also known as GeoSLU. My research focuses on using machine learning, AI, remote sensing, and big data analytics to address climate change and related national security challenges such as food, water, and human security. I mean, to me, climate change has been affecting the way of our lives, and anything we do, by threatening food security with shrinking water resources, wildfires that are destructive to our environment, and rising food prices. And you can find the connection to almost any aspects of our lives, activities, to climate change. We need to find new ways to address those challenges, and big data, machine learning, and analytics is one of them, and I look forward to discuss with my panelists today. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Shirish, please.
So thank you for having me on board. My name is Shirish Rawan. I work with United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, which is based in Vienna, Austria. It is the headquarters, one of the headquarters of United Nations. So normally people know a lot of United Nations offices, they work for Earth, but we take care of a cosmos, the entire space. So our essential, why I'm here is we have something called Committee for Peaceful Uses of Outer Space that looks into two aspects. One is keeping the space safe, maintain the space, and second aspect is basically peaceful uses of outer space. And when we talk about peaceful uses of outer space, one of the important aspect is how space can be used for monitoring climate change. And this is where we come in picture, and we know that the climate change manifests into disasters. And victims are often developing countries, and that's where United Nations try to bridge gap between the countries that have all the resources, all the technologies, all the knowledge, and the countries that seek that. And we try to bridge the gap between these two. As everyone knows, that space really contributes almost like 60% of essential climatic variables. So it provides an input, so it is a very important. So we have several initiatives for this. And as we go ahead, I would talk about those initiatives. So thank you.
Thank you, Shirish. And Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Odin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Nick Henschel. I'm currently serving with NGA as the director for the Office of Geomatics, where I lead a team of about 250 really smart geodetic and photogrammetric scientists and PhDs. And for the record, I am not a really smart scientist or PhD. However, I get to brag on my team and brag on all the really cool things that they get to do each and every day. So our mission within the Office of Geomatics is to measure, model, and describe the Earth in increasing frequency and increasing detail in order to provide the nation with increased accuracy, assured positioning, navigation, timing, and targeting. And that, by the way, is not an easy task because the Earth is always changing. You all know this. And if you didn't know, it actually breathes in and out. And so this isn't to scale, but you get what I mean. When the Earth rotates, it actually increases speed and decreases speed based on climate things that are happening, weather phenomenon. When it's orbiting around the sun, it's actually wobbling in space, kind of like a top. And the Earth isn't even a circle. It's more shaped like an ellipsoid. And so that makes things very challenging for our scientists as they try and measure, model, and know the Earth. And so you all are familiar with NGA's motto, right? Know the Earth, show the way, understand the world. So I would argue that in order for us to understand climate change, first we need to know the Earth, and that falls squarely within the office that I get the pleasure to lead. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today to talk about some of the products that we provide and how that can help the community get a better grasp of climate change. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And so what we'll do is we'll ask for questions coming in from the audience, and while we're assembling those, why don't we go ahead and let you, Nick, go ahead and expand upon maybe some of the products that you are working on with respect to climate.
Okay, great. So I think the best example of the products that we produce is our newest elevation model. And so currently we're on track to complete a global 2-meter elevation model by 2024 that will be updated every 3 months. And so I'll say that again, a global 2-meter elevation model updated every 90 days. That is a phenomenal accomplishment because when you look at perspective, the current SRTM, which is the closest thing we have to a global elevation model, was captured in 2014, and it's the 30-meter elevation model, and it was only captured from 60 degrees north to 60 degrees south. And so this new capability provides increased content, but also increased capability. And specifically with climate change, we've already captured the entire Arctic and the entire Antarctic at this 2-meter elevation model. And with that type of resolution, 2 meters, you can actually see things like coastal erosion. You can see shoreline changes. You can see the ice shelf change from cycle to cycle. You can see all kinds of things. The permafrost, that's what I was thinking about. The permafrost actually heaves as the ice melts and thaws every year. It heaves throughout the season, so we're able to see that. And so with this increased content and this increased resolution of elevation, kind of the opportunities are endless as far as the things that we can study every 90 days and the change that's happening both in the Arctic and the Antarctic.
Fantastic. Thank you. And let's go over to Chris. I would like to ask you, as a GEOINTer, how did you find your way to grappling with these issues of population and climate and change and security? What was your path?
Well, I actually started as an academic at Columbia University. When I was getting my PhD, I worked in the research administration for the Provost's office when we founded the Earth Institute. Some people have heard about the Earth Institute. And the inaugural lecture was actually by a gentleman named Professor Joel Cohen, who had just written a book, How Many People Can the Earth Support? And that was 25 years ago. It took me a quarter century to come up with my answer to his question. But to me, it's always struck me as kind of the most important question. When I ended up kind of almost by accident, helping found In-Q-Tel and ended up in the intelligence community for the past 20 years, I was always kind of shocked by how we didn't really ask that question. It even took a while before we started talking about human geography. And the human geography stuff, understandably, due to kind of the wars we were in, was really about tribes and languages and affiliations and things like that. But I think a lot of people are shocked, would be shocked to know that we didn't even really know how many people were in Afghanistan, in 2001 when we went in. Turns out roughly 20 million. And most people, 20 years later when we left, don't realize that that population nearly doubled to 38 million. It's just not something that the national security community really looks at and calculates in. It's just not really part of, what's in our kind of focal plane, So, it's something I had long before I came to the intelligence community, and I feel like there are these scientific bodies of knowledge, there are these debates, there are these communities that look at the world in a different way that the national security community really should be leaning on, if only just for diversity and sensibilities and ways that they look at the planet.
Excellent, yeah. Agree. Concur. Shirish, I was going to ask you that if you could just talk a little bit more about your initiatives at the UN that help to mobilize a lot of different stakeholders. I know, the member states to advance these sort of big sweeping sustainable goals linked to climate change. I know we're all watching the 30-30-30 sustainable goal model. So would you like to expand about how you mobilize your stakeholders?
All right. So being part of United Nations, the main framework that we follow is the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, or we also call it 17 Sustainable Development Goals, that has 256 indicators that every country has basically pledged that they will basically collect all the data information and they'll try to achieve those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the goals is, everyone knows that Sustainable Development Goal 13 talks about climate action. So my office essentially contributes to it, and how we mobilize larger stakeholders in this, specifically space is our central focus. So through our Committee for Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, almost all the space agencies and even private actors, they visit our committee like 3 times in a year, and that's where we discuss how we can really make best use of space, including many other aspects that includes climate change. So one initiative that we have, we call Space for Climate Action. This initiative will basically go from countries to countries in developing countries to advise different stakeholders, because in each country there is a ministry that deals with climate change, and there is ministry that deals with disasters, and then agriculture, but how they can really put their act together. So really touching the countries in basically developing world a lot. And the second part is Space for Climate Observatory that has been recently already launched with headquarters in Paris. We are supporting that. And that's where, as everyone said, that you are generating such a valuable and precious data. Now, how that data can be contributed and made available for larger community, those who are using it for basically predicting climate change and all sort of things. So this is the way we are trying to mobilize the communities. And then the very important initiative is called UN Spider, that is United Nations Platform for Space-Based Information for Disaster Management and Emergency Response. The short name is very attractive, UN Spider. This then takes care of what climate change manifests into, the kind of disasters that countries who don't contribute to climate change, they are the ones, the victims. So through this platform, we take all countries on board and we basically give them capacity to deal with those challenges. So very grassroots level work. So right from global, mobilizing the global community to going to countries at root level. That's how we try to take care of this issue.
At all different scales,
Yeah.
you're working it. That's wonderful. And Dr. Sagan, I was going to say, St. Louis is becoming the epicenter for geospatial, all things geospatial, and St. Louis University is right in the middle of it. And could you explain a little bit about how your program is evolving to accommodate the needs of the new NGA?
Thanks, Odin.
In light of climate, of course, right?
Yes. So, let me take a step back and talk about the climate change and why, and we have to worry about that, and how we are preparing ourselves and next generation of tech talent to address those challenges, right? So, first of all, the climate change is one of the greatest challenges, grand challenges in our times. Addressing that, understanding the causes, and also finding ways how we mitigate the impact of climate change requires big data, analytics at scale. And then the data sets, on the other hand, we are being drawn in big data. And we have been collecting data for hundreds of years, just looking at satellite imagery. And that's, in this context, maybe that makes more sense, been collecting spatially and temporally tagged images like since 1950s, right? Today, hundreds of satellites, mobile devices, on the ground, in the air, social media, our cell phones. So the tsunami of data sets, right? We need to analyze them using new ways, and machine learning AI, that's why it comes into play. Now, the current challenge to address those issues, in my opinion, the gap between the people who has the expertise in climate change, expertise in imaging science, spectral science, right, and geospatial analytics. On the other hand, the folks who are good at coding, and those how to come together and those skill sets, right? So that's a gap, that's a challenge. So to address those challenges, 2 years ago, almost this time, we established Geospatial Institute at St. Louis University, which is also known as GeoSLU. We built new programs, undergraduate degree and master's and PhD degrees in geoinformatics. And we have been teaching those AI, machine learning, and those cutting-edge technology, really the next generation of GEOINT leaders, analysts, and workforce who can take on the challenges. So that's what we are up to at St. Louis University.
Excellent.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Bassett. So we have two wonderful questions here, and I'll let each of you, let's see, we have about 10 minutes or so, or a little less than that, for the panel. So I've got two questions. We'll begin with words matter. When are we going to stop using the benign term climate change and start calling it what it is, a climate crisis?
Yeah, I'll take the bait. I was really pleased when The Guardian, which is a newspaper in the UK, their editorial board, their editors, wrote their editorial guidance to all of their reporters publicly so that their readers could read it. And they said, we're no longer going to call it climate change. We're going to call it a climate emergency. They were like, we're done with it. We're done with the debate. Is there change? Is it human induced? Is the warming? Blah, blah, blah. There's a climate emergency, and we have to recognize that in our reporting. So whoever wrote that, thumbs up. I agree with that. I think we need to recognize that oftentimes on Twitter, I hate to refer to anything on Twitter, for God's sake, but you'll often see hashtag climate emergency with hashtag ecological emergency. And frankly, I always add that in my retweets, an extra hashtag population emergency. You can't keep adding 80 million people to the planet every year, 10 New York cities, one Germany to the planet every year thinking like, this stuff's just gonna work itself out. So I think there's a few reinforcing emergencies that need to be called what they are. And we need to, as a national security community, actually think about all instruments of national power to deal with what is the largest existential crisis facing our species and our planet.
Excellent. I know back in the day when I was working on this topic, the challenge was that oftentimes the intelligence community didn't recognize anything climate as an actual security topic or an intelligence question, if you will. And by drawing those hard correlations to what security is with all of the perturbations and touch points that climate transcends, I think that was our big challenge. And we made a lot of progress through with NGA's leadership and the foundational aspect and the research being done at the academic and global scales. So I think if the term climate security was relatively new, and we just started using it, and it became a more accepted topic, issue or concern. So yeah, I think we can continue to show those correlations as we move forward. And so I'm going to ask the next question then. Political discussion focuses on the cost of taking the actions to slow and stop climate change. But what is the cost of inaction? And I'd like anyone on the panel to take. Shirish?
So inaction, where it will lead.
Cost of inaction.
I would like to touch one very significant initiative that United Nations launched on 23rd of September that is called Food Systems Summit.
Okay.
Because everyone knows that the impact of climate change can't be felt just on a regular basis as such. It feels number one, when it hits as a disaster, like floods in New York or heat waves in Canada when it kills hundreds. Previously, we know that any disaster comes, only people in Bangladesh or some smaller countries get killed, developing countries. But now, the even developed best countries are also not spared. So this is what is the cost of climate change. This is one thing. And I was talking about Food System Summit, and already our colleague is working in food security. Millions of people are hungry, and the way we produce and consume and the waste food, that has become such an emergency, and climate change is one of the important aspects that is putting food systems into danger right now. So if we don't really take an urgent action on that, so there are 5 key areas now Secretary General of United Nations assigned. One of the areas is about risk resilience, and that's where it touches the climate change related issues. It becomes quite important, and the way he said is very important, that by the time even you have finished the breakfast, you have already been dependent on half of the world. And that's where we really need a lot of international cooperation on all the aspects if you want to see that everybody is like sustainable, the food systems are resilient, and climate contributes a lot. And the best data for studying the climate change is produced by intelligence community, and which also finds a lot of applications to take care of this particular issue. So
got it.
It's my take on this.
Thank you for that.
If you have time, I can just make a very quick comment on that.
Yeah.
Really support my panelists here. Food security, that's one of my major research area, and I'm happy to talk about a couple of things here.
Do you want to speak up a little bit, Basit?
Last year, locust outbreaks globally affected about 50 million people and left 50 million people in starvation, right? That alone, just one incident, right? And that's the cost of not taking any action. And of course, if we are looking at the whole spectrum of issues, wildfires, and we are seeing in California, right? And having thousands of people are being affected with that. And the cost of rebuilding that communities, I can't really imagine a number for that cost.
Thank you, Basit. I have a question for you. We only have a couple of minutes left. So, Nick, one of the questions is directed to you. Is your geodetics team leveraging automation techniques in the 90-day production model that you described? And if so, what kind?
Absolutely. I'm glad they asked that question. So piggybacking off what Vasset was saying about the huge increase in data, right? The only way we would be able to capture an entire globe at that 2-meter elevation model is through utilization of algorithms, high-performance computers, workflows, change detection software, and those types of things. And in the case of the 2-meter elevation model, we instituted what's called a geo-data cooperative, where we bring in people from industry, academia, government, military, everyone into the fold, and work together to figure out and solve these problems so that we can literally comb the desert and pull in all of this commercial imagery, all of this NTM imagery, and run it through that high-performance computing environment, do the change detection, and then it spits out on the other side elevation models. And so NGA did not produce a single elevation model. It's all happened through this geodata cooperative and high-performance computers and AI, machine learning, all of that. So we're actually applying that to this problem set, and it's very exciting.
The follow-on to that, Nick, just quickly, is can you release any of your 2-meter DIM to the public?
So my last question, or the last question you asked, I was going to jump in on that about political action.
Oh.
So the political action can absolutely start a revolution, right? So this 2-meter elevation began under the Obama administration when he directed the National Science Foundation and NGA to map the Arctic and the Antarctic, and we did that. And that sparked the rest of the globe for us to follow through with that. What I would say is the Arctic and the Antarctic through the National Science Foundation is publicly available. NGA is the product that we're producing, elevation model for the entire globe, is unclassified. And so if you have a contract with NGA or you're studying scientific research, it is available, but it is not, NGA's elevation model is not publicly available.
Not at this time. Okay.
Correct.
And then the last question, we have 1 minute, and I'll give it to Chris. How can we help politicians and policymakers understand our population emergency in a short statement? How would you describe it?
Part of it is skipping to the punchline, I like to say. Feel free not to read my book or buy it or anything. In the end, it is possible to bend the global population curve and every year have fewer people on the planet through investing in the empowerment, education, integration of the workforce of women, for women and girls around the world. Full stop. Any geography where women and girls are empowered, educated, integrated in the workforce, and have access to family planning technologies, you tend to be below replacement value fertility. So the notion that the population curve has to look like this forever turns out not to be true. It's not an inexorable thing. So that may sound weird, like that money won't go to NGA's bottom line, it won't go to the software vendors, but you could do it for less than the cost of the Joint Strike Fighter program, and I think you'd be shocked at what the global, the global impact would be.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our panelists for this wonderful teaser of a session, and we hope to answer any of your other questions here after the event. So thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, Odin.
Thank you very much, panelists. I thought that was just phenomenal conversation on climate change, talking about population, the real-time space-based food security, Vasset, and that 2-meter model, Nick. I think that'll be some great stuff that's coming forward. So again, thank you so much. Fascinating panel.